Alright, what's going on, people? It's a Boxing Genius here, and for today we will be doing a pre-fight breakdown of Casimero versus Rigondeaux, and some things which you can take away from both fighters. Now, this prediction is going to be with the assumption that Rigondeaux will go back to his old style. Okay, so his fight with Donaire, the style that he used in that fight, assuming that he will use that style in this fight, this is what the prediction is going to be based off of. However, if he does perform the way he did against Solis, if he goes with that game plan, then this prediction will be completely washed away. I don't think that will happen because Casimero enjoys fighting and boxing way too much on the outside, and I don't think Casimero will go for that trap. I don't think Casimero will stay in the pocket to trade punches with Rigondeaux like Solis did or other of his opponents. So it will be a boxing match on the outside. Hopefully that's what it's going to be. And I'll base my prediction on that, assuming that Rigondeaux will resort to his old boxing style. Anyway, let's get right into it. The first one that, in my opinion, will make a lot of difference for Casimero is the over-reliance of Rigondeaux with bending at the waist way too much. And I'll show you what I mean here. So over here, he's gonna bend at the waist and then pivot. Alright, so for a guy like Donaire, he didn't punch from this position, but for a guy like Casimero who can punch from different angles, this can be really dangerous if Rigondeaux does this against a Casimero. He can sneak in a right hand over here, and it can be a nightmare for Rigondeaux trying to figure out. And if you look at Rigondeaux versus Lomachenko, you know, it was really that which made him lose. He over-relied on bending at the waist. He did not use distance. He was pivoting, bending at the waist, pivoting, bending at the waist, pivoting. It was too predictable. He did not utilize distance management. He did not utilize head movement. He just stayed there for too long and he waited for that big shot and then he pivoted out, you know? That's what he did. And for a while it worked, but for years now we've been trying to figure out how to defeat that, and, you know, different guys have exposed it. You look at Tony, for example, a lot of dudes have already hit Tony because he over-relied on that, so Tony later on had to make an adjustment. Same thing for Rigondeaux, same thing for Floyd. Floyd over-relied on bending at the waist against Cotto, and then later on he decided to stop doing that because he was getting hit, he was getting timed. So here's the second one. He will bend at the waist again here, and he will stay there for too long. Okay, before stepping out. And by the time he stepped out, Donaire already landed a right hand, which I think was blocked. Okay, which I think was blocked, but more often than not, this punch will land. Alright, now let's look at the right hook of Rigondeaux and why I think it will not land against a guy like Casimero. So, here's the first one here. What you'll see is they are pulling each other's glove, and then Rigondeaux was able to time him, leap inside the lead foot of Donaire, stepping out right away. So I'm sorry if I paused it too much. Stepping out right away, and then moving back. Now I want you to kind of figure it out for yourself first. Over here again, the same thing will happen. He stays for a while, and then he times Donaire with the left hook, boom. And yes, it's pronounced as Donaire, not Donaire. So for all of you Westerners, maybe you should try to practice pronouncing it right. It's not Pacquiao, it's Pacquiao. It's not Casimero, it's Casimero. Alright? If you say Canelo Alvarez, you should also be able to say Donaire. It's pretty simple. Here's the next one. So over here he's gonna lean on the front foot, leap in, okay? When he overcommits to the right hook, what's gonna happen is he has a tendency to go back on the front foot or the back foot right away. Boom. And then here he got countered. Okay, he bent it at the waist. He tried to exit way too much. He's overcautious. Rigondeaux is too cautious to knock someone out. That's the thing. Okay? Yes, some of you will argue he has no power, but the thing is, he's just overcautious. And by the time he lands a punch, he thinks about moving back right away. Now, Why will it not work against a guy like Casimero? Well, it's pretty simple. Casimero won't stay in the mid-range for too long. If you look at Donaire, the reason why he stayed on the mid-range for too long is because his style implies, or his style is naturally embedded or made to stay planted on the ground and then wait for his opponent to throw a punch. Or as you can see here, he's just waiting. Now, in the earlier parts of Donaire's career, if you look at his amateur fights or his Olympics, I'm not sure if it's the Olympics, but I've seen his fight with who's this guy again? Brian Viloria. If you look at that fight, it's an early fight of Donaire. He's a little bit more bouncy. He uses distance a little bit more, but in the later stages of his career, he just decided, man, I'm going to plant my feet, and then I'm going to wait for my opponent to punch. So if you look at this, he just plants his feet, waiting for his opponent to punch. But the right hook of Rigondeaux is so tight, it's so straight, he doesn't really have a lot of load up, he doesn't telegraph it, that by the time that lands, that left hook of Donaire, no matter how quick it is, will not land, because Rigondeaux moves away right back when he throws that punch. So here's the next one. Again, they are staying in the mid-range, relatively close to each other, and then Rigondeaux will just move back a little bit, and then time Donaire with the right hook, which isn't super powerful. As you can see here, not a lot of load up. It's kind of tight. His elbows are a little bit in, and then he just throws a long right hook, and then moves away. It will not work against a guy like Casimero because Casimero won't just stay there for that long, okay? And yeah, that's the reason why it will not work. Here's the next one. Another right hook on the side of, now here they're a little bit more on the long range. This is why Rigondeaux was forced to leap in on the right hook. And so if this is the same scenario that will occur in the Rigondeaux versus Casimero fight, I think there will be a time when Rigondeaux will overcommit and he will get countered with something. So over here got countered with the left hook. So right now, there is a question for Rigondeaux to answer. Is he gonna force the issue by leaping in and attacking Rigondeaux, or attacking Casimero, leaping in when he throws the right hook? Or will he abandon the right hook at all and just rely on his jab and his left hand? He has to choose something. But if you look at his previous fights, his left hand is improving. So he probably won't rely much on his right hook in the fight against Casimero, but if he does, there are a couple of tendencies that might occur which Casimero can take advantage of. Here's the next one. It's going to be a right hook and then a pivot. He's going to throw a right hook and then a pivot here. Okay, now for a guy like Casimero, he is able to throw punches from different angles, like I said a while ago. So this position is completely not safe for a guy like Rigondeaux, because Casimero can time him right here. After he throws the hook, he'll throw a crazy haymaker punch, a right hand or something like that, which can make this position really dangerous for Rigondeaux. Now Rigondeaux hasn't faced a lot of opponents which is aggressive enough to go for the kill whenever he pivots out, besides Lomachenko probably. If you look at the Lomachenko fight, when Rigondeaux was pivoting out like this, Lomachenko was still punching him. But for a guy like Donaire or other of his opponents, not really. Here's the next one. He's gonna do that one again, and if you can see here, he's gonna pivot out, but by pivoting out, his face is facing this way. So he's open for the right hand. Now, if you lower this a little bit more, not only are you open for the right hand, but you're also open for the uppercut. Boom, and this is what happened to Tete when he bended at the waist. Casimero stepped in, he was able to throw a right hook. It landed on, I think it was the temple, I forgot. Okay, but he stayed there for too long, and that's the same issue that Rigondeaux has, which I think will be taken advantage of later on if Casimero figures them out pretty well. However, I do want to acknowledge the mid-range dominance of Rigondeaux after all. I mean, on the mid-range, he is clearly a great fighter. We saw that with the fight with Donaire. However, again, I don't think Casimero is dumb enough to stay on the mid-range with Rigondeaux. The reason why Donaire did that was because Donaire was trying to land that one big shot on Rigondeaux. And the only way to do that is by planting your feet and staying on the same place, waiting for your opponent to throw, which he did, and then trying to throw a counter hook. The reason why it did not work is because Rigondeaux's punches were pillow punches. It was landing, it wasn't powerful, and the less powerful your punches are, the less telegraph it has to be. So the punches were quick, and then Donaire wasn't able to time him, because by the time he tries to counter Rigondeaux, Rigondeaux is already out of there. So look at this. Boom. As you can see, most of his offense comes from the mid-range. Over here, they are at arm's length. He doesn't have to step in at all. He just has to throw that left hand, reach for it a little bit. Boom, boom. Here's the next one. A lot of his offense comes from the mid-range. Over here again, they are at arm's length. All he has to do is step in a little bit, and then he's gonna land that shot. Here is gonna be a left hand again. They're on the mid-range. Donaire is a fighter who stays on the mid-range for too long, because that's his game plan, but it did not work. Now let's look at the long-range difficulties of Rigondeaux and his tendency to be overcautious whenever they're on the long range, okay? When you're on the long range, you tend to be unaware of the distance between you and your opponent, hence making you hesitant to throw a punch and then enter right away. Which we've seen that with the Donaire fight. I think if Donaire kind of stayed on the long range a little bit more instead of trying to stay in the mid-range, he'll be able to confuse Rigondeaux. So you see the body language of Rigondeaux from the long range, right? He's pretty hesitant. He doesn't know what to throw. He doesn't know when to punch. Why is that? Because he's not aware of the distance, and he's not aware of when his opponent is going to enter. When you are in the mid-range, it's a lot easier to read your opponent because you're closer to each other, and it's a lot easier to land your punches as a result as well. But Donaire did not do that, and that's why he lost. Stayed on the mid-range for too long. Here's another one. When they are in the long range, you can see Rigondeaux trying to paw that glove. Paw. Come on, bro. Why are you not touching my glove? Why are you not touching my glove? All right, as you can see here, Donaire doesn't fall for that shit. He's not gonna paw with a guy like Rigondeaux. And then you see him struggling. You see him hesitant to throw. When they are on the long range, it's a lot harder for Rigondeaux to set up his offense because he has a tendency to get overcautious. And this is exactly the style of Casimero. Casimero doesn't like to stay on the mid-range for too long. He uses footwork, he steps in and out. He stays relatively on the long range. If you look at the Tete fight and the Duke Micah fight, and even his older fights, he likes to stay in the long range. Doesn't really like to paw with his opponent, which is a lot more dangerous because you're closer to each other. So that was it. I think ultimately the key to this fight is timing and angles on the side of Casimero. He has to be able to take away the footwork and then the defense of Rigondeaux by being able to force Rigondeaux to bend at the waist and be overly defensive, like what he did to Lomachenko, or like what Rigondeaux did to Lomachenko. If you look at that fight, Rigondeaux got overwhelmed with volume. He stayed on his waist for too long. He bent at the waist for too long, and Lomachenko was able to use a lot of angles to take advantage of that. Rigondeaux tried to pivot out. Lomachenko had an answer. Hopefully that will be the same for Casimero. Hopefully he doesn't get victimized by the footwork, which I think is pretty predictable now. So again, this is assuming that Rigondeaux will fight in his old style. However, if Rigondeaux decides to brawl like he did in his previous fights, which I think he did not really brawl 100%. You look at the Solis fight, he did brawl for a couple of rounds, but a lot of the rounds were like he was boxing, he was defending himself. He was being on the defensive, sitting on the back foot. So I think he will definitely go back to that old style against Casimero because he's getting older, he doesn't have that same pop. And he's just overcautious, man. He's overcautious. That can be good, but that can also be bad. I think it's gonna be bad against a guy like Casimero to be overcautious and to be overly defensive, because that will just make Casimero more and more aggressive. Now, is there a chance that he'll get countered? Yes, but I don't see fucking Rigondeaux knocking out Casimero. No. So that was it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace.